This is also changing, because if we look at the profile of all the grants that have been allocated this year by H3 Africa to African-based scientists, most of the conditions that will be researched, that have been researched for the past 5 years and will be researched for the next 5 years, are African-based issues, and also African-based scientists. So this also, H3 Africa that allowed, this is just one example of building infrastructure for some of the branches. That means that this allowed them to perform some of the things that they couldn't do outside of the continent by doing it locally. This H3 Africa also invested in qualitative type of research with the aim to see what is the perception of the society, what is the perception of the leader with regard to the use of genetics for public health, and this is a very, very important issue. Another existing issue that is still an existing issue is the issue of knowledge, specifically genetic education in medical, amongst medical professionals or scientists, but also in the society in general, as illustrated by this work that we published like 10 years ago. And H3 Africa, through the network that we have now, that you can see here, a network that includes many studies on ethical issues, that include a bioinformatic building capacity, that include collaborative centers associated in many other African countries, that include specifically oriented biochemical research. H3 Africa have been able to train for the past 5 years nearly 100 postgraduate students, and these are the numbers that was available like last year, 49 PhD students. So that means that the future is definitively bright. The future is definitely bright because of this specific initiative. And 10 years ago, when we were complaining about African scientists not doing research that is patent to African conditions and based in Africa, this is a typical example, of course extremely biased because these are work from my group, that show that now this research have been performed in Africa, published in Africa by African scientists on African conditions. So I will maybe finish the last slide by talking a little bit on three important issues, or this really important issue that is very specific to Egypt. And you all know the Great Pyramid in the middle. You probably all know the Rosetta Stone. And the Rosetta Stone have been very important for the history of humanity and the history of Africa specifically. Because this is my uncle on the right-hand side used that very stone by comparing the script in Egyptian, in Roman and in Greek, to allow us to understand what have happened in this part of Africa for the past 4,000 years. This very same approach was used for the Human Genome Project that compared the genome within himself, the genome of human and the other species, the genome of cell state amongst themselves, to allow us to know what we know now about the Human Genome Project. We know also that the many variations that we have in our genome will only be fully understood if we understand the extent of variation that we have within African genome. So clearly, we need to increase through H3 Africa and other initiatives the representation of African genome in GOI study. And as shown here, even last year, the proportion was still extremely small. We also probably need to increase the number of variants that are present in database at this moment for monogenic condition. The reason being that those databases that only contain, for now, 10% of variants from African genome are the ones that are used to evaluate deleteriousness. So if we do not have the representation, we may mislabel many variants as deleterious, specifically they are from people of African ancestry. And this is important not just for Africa, but this is important for global genetics. And there was a typical example that was published last year for a few variants labeled as pathogenic for a very, very long time for inherited cardiovascular condition, until a scientist tried to test those variants in people of African ancestry in America and realized that those variants were just polymorphism. So the representation of all populations in human exome data would improve our capacity globally of determining what is deleterious or not. Funding African research is not just charities for our global good, and we need to be at the forefront of that. H3 Africa will generate a lot of data. But H2 Africa also will probably elicit some new questions, like the accidental funding, like the return of result, like the funding of unknown significance. So we need to be prepared as African scientists on how we're going to tackle that, because we will need to deal with that day to day with our patients, with our family. But it is important to stress here that H2 Africa Consortium through the NIH and Wonkam Trust is a really serious initiative. But the true sustainability will only happen in-house. It will only happen when you, as African nation, will increase our investment in research and innovation. It will only happen if we take steps through decision makers, through our nation, through our ministry, to try to change this map and increase our investment in genomic research in order to address the issue of our people, of the health of our people. I think we are truly believers that genetics will be important. Genetics will not solve all the issues, but H2 Africa definitely have shown that genetics will definitely contribute to solve most of the issues. The typical example is the use of genome sequencing that have helped specifically when Ebola problem arrived in West Africa, and the sequencing of Ebola genome have allowed to control a little bit, to participate to control that specific epidemic. And on this one, I would like to thank you for your kind attention.